Hello, my name's Claire, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to do a sketchbook tour of this sketchbook, which I started back in 2016 and finished somewhere between mid-2017 and 2018. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions or any comments at all, please leave them down below. Here we go. Okay, so this is my sketchbook. This one is a gouache painting of a goldfish, but I think I elaborated slightly on the tail to make it look more flourishing. The reason I did this one is because I wanted to experiment using gouache, because I know it's quite bright and you can sort of layer it up in a different way than watercolour. I was really happy with this one actually for a first go. I wanted it to be quite loose, and that's what I achieved, I think. This one was an exercise in painting negative space. It was just a bit of fun really, which I did while I was watching TV. This is a chain which I took a photo of on a beach in Mousehole in Cornwall. I really liked it because I like the contrast of the rust with the little bits of seaweed and things like that, and the stones and the softness of the sand and sort of the roughness of the chain. I really like that one, and I like the way that it built up as I did more layers. This is a mashup of a few different photos that I found of succulents. I really wanted to do one from above, but I didn't want it to be too dark, which is why I've got the greens back here rather than going to black, which it actually was in the photo, I think. I really liked this one. It was an experiment as well in doing the darker lines on the outside, which I did start doing for a while, but for some reason I've gone off it a bit now. I really like the nice sharp edges that you can get with masking tape. This was watercolour pen and ink. These were sketches for this image, and this is completely not my style, but I was watching a video, or I watch a vlogger on YouTube called Danica Sills, I think that's how you pronounce her name, and she does things in this sort of style, and I love the way that she did her hair, the sort of flowing lines of the hair on all of her characters, so I wanted to give that a go. So that's what I did here. And I decided I wanted to stick to just one colour palette. Well, no, you know, a simple colour palette of yellow, green and turquoise. So that's what I did. I had this idea of a, what's this called? An octopus coming out of a jar. And then I wasn't sure what I wanted on top of the jar, but I knew that I wanted there to be light in it somehow. So I popped a candle on top of the jar, and that's where the light was coming from. I think I had a reference picture for that. Slightly. I think I had to elaborate on it slightly. These were all sketches of my son, drawn from photos, because I can never sketch when he's around. This was back when he was probably about 1, actually. He's now 4, so that shows you how long ago that was, and I never got around to painting them completely. These are biro drawings, so these are... There's no black used in these, it's red, green and blue, and when they're sort of layered up together it makes the shadows look black. That is black actually, that was a lie, but these two don't have black used in them at all. I really like doing biro drawings, but they do take a long time. This was a colour study that I did, loosely based on, I think it was Mateus or Urbanovitz, I think that's how you pronounce his name, loosely based on the colours that he uses or used for his shopfront book, but I added in a few of my own there, and I used that to do a few other pieces which I think you might see further on, to sort of get inspiration for the colour palettes to use for them. These are just flowers from the garden. This was one of the first pictures I did with dip pen and ink, and that was the style that I decided to go for Inktober in 2016. Yeah, that's that page. We went to Yorkshire, and this was the cottage that we stayed in there, and I just really liked this corner of the room. It looked really nautical, I thought. So it's got the lamp, which is a lighthouse, and a wicker chair. This didn't work. This was meant to be a fridge, so there was meant to be a girl kneeling down here, a little girl kneeling down looking in a fridge, and I just wanted to do something where the light was really nice. I was inspired by Nima Sprout on Instagram, because I really like the way that she does light in her paintings when she uses gouache, but I just couldn't achieve it. I layered it up too thickly and it started cracking and going all horrible, so that was that one. This is a drawing of our conservatory, but since then we've had a complete tidy up and this brick has now been plastered and it's more of a sort of living space, but this was back when it was a complete tip. These are flowers from our garden again, which I took photos of. I think I might have drawn some of them from life, but I took photos of and drew those. Some of these are on stuck in pieces of paper because I wanted watercolour paper to use. This is a place called Peratallada in Spain, which is a really beautiful place. It took me ages to decide which part of it I wanted to paint, and I was practicing here using different colours with the watercolour, mixing them in, creating gradients and things like that, so it's not all one flat block of colour. This was taken or done from a photo that I took of Teignmouth Beach, which actually, this isn't a very good representation of Teignmouth Beach in Devon because it doesn't really represent it very well. But I used a white jelly roll pen here. I think one of the first times that I'd used it to do the highlights on the waves which are coming in. I really like the colour palette. I think I used masking tape here to mask off this bit while I painted this bit. I just really like it. I really like the colours. I'm not keen on this one. This is a rat. I went through a phase of painting animals and I wanted to try and make them as realistic as possible. I think I made a mistake putting the background on, and I put it on afterwards so it doesn't quite go around the fur very well. But it was an experiment. I like the spattering effect at the back. This one, I can't remember what the artist was called, but it was inspired by an artist who does this sort of effect in her paintings. She paints like trees and forests and lovely little animals and things. I can't remember what her name is. Never mind. This was an experiment as well. I wanted to practice making a repeating pattern. So the idea is you do a tile of things. So this was all drawn in biro. I just drew a random load of things from my drawer, and then you have to put that tile. So this corner here is here. I think you can just basically see it very lightly in pencil there. This corner here is here. This corner is here, and this corner is here, and then on this page I filled in the gap that results from those corners coming together, and then you use that to build your repeating tile. So this would be cut. I'm not explaining it very well, but it's a repeating pattern. I love these. This is something that I'm really proud of doing, and I want to do more in this style. So these are quite realistic. I was inspired by one of my son's books, something about a bunyip, and the illustrator had used watercolour around the edges that sort of blended into different colours around the edges, and I really like the effect, and I've used it on this rabbit too. I haven't used it since because I liked it on the shells, but I wasn't too keen on it on the rabbit. I also made these shells into a repeating pattern, and I tried to put them on cups on Redbubble. Didn't get very far, nobody bought them. Picture of Johnny Depp. He used to be my favourite when I was younger. A little train of my son's when I just fancied painting something. This was an experiment in trying to be a bit looser with my watercolour painting and drawing, so I drew it out freehand. It's the library in Bideford. I drew it out freehand, and I also wanted to use some more abstract type of colours and some splatters and things, so I did that. These ones were practicing putting the paint on first and then drawing over the top using a single line. They're alright. Oh, I hate this one. This is my mum and dad's house, so this is using the same concept, putting the colours on first and trying to use a few crazy, not natural colours, but I really don't like it. I really don't like the way it's come out, but it was a good experiment. This is a burger drawn with pen and ink and watercolour. And this was an experiment in doing a blurry background. And also food illustration. I wanted to try food illustration. This is one of the very first ones I did. I'm really pleased with how it turned out. I used masking fluid for the highlights on the bacon and the tomato. This is Ayrshire Street in Appledore in Devon. Another pen and ink and watercolour painting. And this one was a bit better. This is another experiment in trying to get the colours less natural but still looking like what it's meant to look like. This is a table from above when we went out with my sister and her husband for a meal, and this was outside, so it was sunny, so the shadows that were cast were really, really lovely. And I like how that one turned out. This is one of my favourite paintings in my sketchbook. This is done from a reference photo that I found online. I think it was on a free to use, royalty free website. And I just love it. I love the reflections in the water. I think that's the first time that I've ever managed to capture reflections accurately. I love all the detail. The shadows, the different colours within the shadows, they're not black. I just love everything about it, and this, I carried on using this style, and I think this style is very close to the style that I have now. These two were experiments in using limited colour palettes. So both of them have only got 3 colours in them. This is more obvious, you can see the yellowy orange colour, the pink and the purple. But I really liked the way that those turned out. I think it does help having a limited colour palette. It keeps things looking less muddy. Blank page. I wasn't sure on this one. I did it on brown paper and used gouache. I think that's white gouache. This was somewhere in the Cotswolds that I visited with my sister, but I wasn't keen on it. Some conkers in pen, ink and watercolour, and I've used pencil as well because I wanted some of the areas a bit darker than I could get with watercolour. And this is another painting of our conservatory before we had it made into more of a room. As you can see, it was a complete tip, but this is my son's play kitchen, and all of his toys just used to be out there, and all of his pictures on the wall. We used to have a dining table out there because we didn't have anywhere else to put it. But it looks a lot better than that now. It looks like a room now. This was my mum and dad's fireplace, which I just felt like painting when I was around there one day. I like this one. I like the looseness of the watercolour around the edges and the way that it's not quite perfect. There's bleeds and things like that. These two I painted when we were in Porthleven in Cornwall. They weren't from life, they were from photos. So the harbour in Porthleven and then a more zoomed out version of the pub over the other side. I think I tried to keep a relatively relatively, what's the word, restrained colour palette on these, which is why I think they've worked. It's Inktober 2017 that I used the flower idea for. So these are all dip pen and ink flowers, and there should be, how many days are there in October? 31? There should be 31 flowers here, and each day I did one. So I started with this daisy up here, and I looked up a flower each day, and I did a dip pen and ink drawing. And I don't think I've done a single dip pen and ink drawing in this sort of hatched way for the shadows since then. But it was enjoyable at the time. And that's that. So the way I used this sketchbook was to randomly open at a page and fill it in, because I find that if I do that, there's less pressure to live up to the page before. So there are a lot of things in here that I really like this one, for example, and if I'd have gone straight on to the next page after that one, I would have felt like it had to live up to that page. But as I did it the way I did, it always felt like I was opening, you know, starting a new book afresh. Oh, I didn't show you that one. That was the very first thing I painted in here. It's sort of a mixture of, this was meant to be my son, but it turned out looking like a little old man baby. This was my son. I painted that from life, I can remember doing that. And this idea was from Minnie Small. She suggested painting a shape in gouache, leaving it to dry, and then seeing what you could create out of that shape using pen on top. So these are using biro on top, this was using paint on top of that one. And I really like the way, this is a very strange page, but I really like the way that the eggshells of these bits that I've torn out of a magazine and the cardboard are reflected in the colours that I've used for this portrait, which is a terrible portrait, but I quite like that page overall. So there we go. I hope you've enjoyed my sketchbook tour. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, or if you have any comments at all, it would be great to read them. Thank you for watching.